You ready? I'm now going to take about 10 minutes. I'm going to give you some preliminary information about how the case is going to proceed. We're going to try and get all the way through lunch so that we can make sure to get you out of here today. If you need to go out, you need to use the restroom, go ahead, raise your hand, and then we will certainly accommodate you. The fact that the defendant has been charged with a crime is not proof that he has actually committed a crime. The defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which puts in issue every element of the crime charged. The state has a burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt each element of the charge. The defendant has no burden of proving that a reasonable doubt exists. He also does not have any duty to have to call any witnesses. He does not have to produce any evidence. The defendant, again, is presumed innocent. This presumption is going to continue throughout the entire trial unless you find during your deliberations that it has been overcome by evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is one for which a reason exists, and it may arise from the evidence, it may arise from lack of evidence. It is such a doubt as would exist in the mind of a reasonable person after fully, fairly, and carefully considering all the evidence or lack of evidence. It is your duty to determine the facts in this case from the evidence produced in court. It is also your duty to accept the instructions of the law that I'm going to give you, regardless of what you personally think the law is or what you think the law should be. You are to apply the law to the facts, and in that way, that's how you're going to decide the case. It is important to keep your minds open and attentive throughout the trial. It would be hard to do this if you start discussing the case before you've heard all of the evidence. So until you begin your deliberations, please do not discuss the case with each other or anyone else, or even allow yourself to be in a position where you might hear something about the case. Don't attempt to determine what the law is by reading about it or researching it or Googling it. Likewise, do not seek out evidence on your own. The case is going to proceed in the following order. First, the prosecutor is going to make an opening statement outlining the state's expected evidence. The defense will then make his opening statement right after the prosecutor, or he may choose to wait until the state rests its case. Secondly, the state is going to present its evidence. Then the defendant may present evidence, but again, there's no requirement that he has to do so. Rebuttal evidence may also be presented. Finally, I will instruct you on the law in deciding the case, and the lawyers are going to make their closing arguments. Then you will go to the jury room, you will select a presiding juror, and that's when you begin your deliberations. With each witness, the attorney calling the witness will go first with what's called direct examination. Then the opposing, Mr. Crane, will be able to cross-examine that witness. Then it's back to the first attorney for any redirect examination. And then finally finishing with Mr. Crane for any recross examination. As the case proceeds, the lawyers and Mr. Crane may make various objections. They have the right and they have the duty to object if they feel that it is appropriate. There are lots of rules of evidence, courtroom procedure, and it's common for judges to need to rule on issues that come up during the trial. Sometimes I'm going to rule on the objections as soon as they're made. Sometimes I might have them come up to the bench. We may whisper about them up at the bench, or we may actually step out into the hallway to discuss a point in more detail. If it is a longer argument, I may have the bailiff take you back to the jury room so that we can have a more lengthy discussion. We're going to do our best to keep disruptions to a minimum, but if they occur, please bear with us. It's all a part of my responsibility to make sure that the evidence presented complies with all of the applicable rules. When an objection is made, I'll rule on it by either saying it's sustained or that it's overruled. If I say it's sustained, it means I'm ruling that the question should not be allowed to be asked or that an answer may not be given. If I say it's overruled, that means that I will allow that question or answer. You don't need to be concerned about why I rule the way that I do, and it's important to disregard any evidence that is not admitted or that's ordered to be stricken. The remarks, statements, and arguments that we hear from the attorneys and Mr. Crane are intended to help you understand the evidence and apply the law. But what they say is not part of the evidence. So you must disregard anything they say that is not supported by the evidence or on the instructions of the law that I'm going to give you. The only evidence you may consider consists of the testimony that is admitted in the courtroom, any evidence or exhibits that might be admitted, such as pictures, you can consider those. It's important to listen carefully to the witness's testimony. You're not going to be given a transcript when you go in the back. So your ability to remember accurately is very important. Any exhibits admitted into evidence will go with you into the jury room. So any pictures admitted will go back with you. You are permitted to take notes, and the clerk will pass out notepads and pens. You don't have to take notes, and if you do take notes, just keep a couple things in mind. Remember, and I've always found this when I was an attorney, if you are taking notes and you're looking down, you may miss something. So you really want to pay attention to the witnesses up on the stand. You want to be watching them, listening to them. And when you're deliberating, it's fine to use your notes to help you remember testimony, but nobody's notes are a verbatim transcript. You will not be taking a transcript back with you. If you do take notes, don't disclose or discuss them until you begin your deliberations. When you're out of the courtroom during a recess, keep the notepads in the jury room. By now, you've heard me mention several times how important it is to keep an open mind and base your verdict only on the evidence as you hear it, or the exhibits, or the instructions of law that I'm going to give you. That way you ensure a fair trial for both sides. In serving on this jury, you are all acting as officers of the court and with an earnest desire to reach a proper verdict. It's important to be impartial, and you cannot let sympathy or prejudice influence you here today. During the recess or lunch, do not discuss this case among yourselves. If anybody asks about the case, you are to tell them that you have been instructed not to talk about the case while you are still listening to the evidence. Do not read, view, or listen to any reports. Again, you as jurors are going to decide this case based solely on the evidence presented here today. So this means that during the trial, again, you must not conduct any independent research. You may not communicate with anyone about the case on your cell phone, through email, or use any technology or social media. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask you to please pay attention to the prosecutor's opening statement. He's going to be making his opening right now.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a case where the defendant grabbed a lamp and swung it at the head and the face of EMT Kirk Huhta. And you'll hear testimony from Kirk Huhta, who is a EMT. He and his partner, Stacy, Poff, responded to a 911 call that the defendant made back on April 10th of 2020, about 11:15 at night. He called 911. He had surgery the day before. His phone was dead. He couldn't get to his pain meds. He was in pain. He was needing help. Mr. Huhta and Ms. Poff responded to the call, doing their job, showed up in Castle Rock at the defendant's house, attempted to enter the house, but the defendant had a dog, and the dog concerned them and was barking. So they didn't get into the house. They called for police help to get into the house to help him. This made the defendant mad. He started calling them names and yelling at him for not coming in and giving him help. So when it took a while, officers showed up. Officer Gann, you'll hear testimony from him as well, that he showed up and he went in the house and was able to get the dog put into the bedroom. And that allowed the EMTs to enter the defendant's house. When they entered the defendant's house, they tried to ask him how they could help him. They were trying to contact family members for him. His phone was dead. They didn't have their numbers. He didn't remember their numbers. Eventually, they were able to get a hold of the defendant's sister, who lived nearby in the area. She she didn't want to help because of the time and the relationship, and the defendant got mad at her and started yelling at her and calling her names on the phone. The defendant then continued to have this kind of combative interaction with the EMTs and the police officers that were there. And at one point in time, the defendant tried to get into the room that had the dog so he could just exit the area. And Kirk Huhta moved in front of the door so the dog wouldn't get back out. And they were still trying to help the defendant. At that point in time, he grabbed a lamppost and he swung it from the ground and he swung it towards Kirk Huhta's face. As he did that, Huhta moved out of the way and he did not get hit by the lamp and the light and the bulb that were on the light. Officer Gann also saw the swinging motion of the lamp going towards the EMT's face and head, and he was able to get the lamp away from the defendant and get control of Mr. Crane. You're going to hear testimony from all three of those people in this case this morning. At the end of this case, I'm going to circle back to you and ask that because of that action of taking the lamp and swinging at the face of another human, that you find the defendant guilty of assault in fourth degree.
Thank you, Mr. Crane. Mr. Crane, would you like to give your opening statement, sir?
Yes, please. Well, this is going to be a case of you having to believe my word against the police. And I think all the evidence will show mine when you hear the whole story. What he just explained is as far from the truth as it can get. I had surgery on the 9th, and I was in surgery all day. It took him hours. He went into my spine. I was having bowel problems and everything because of the nerves were all messed up. And he went into my spine and untangled nerves and got me fixed up. But when the next morning, I was still on their medication and stuff, and I was feeling great. They said if I wanted, I could go home. So we called my brother, and he came and picked me up. It was at the VA hospital in Portland. On the drive home, I got car sick. Well, I thought it was just car sick. And I was very nauseous. And when I got home, my sister brought in, because I had to board my dog, we picked him up on the way home. And so she packed in the dog bed we took down there. I followed her through the door and went straight to the kitchen sink and started throwing up. And she didn't know that, and she went out the front door, got in the car. I was still throwing up when I saw out the kitchen window, then drive away. So, okay, fine. But I went into dry heaves and everything. I was just throwing up so hard I couldn't believe it, and it just really tore up my back. I was able to walk and stuff at that time yet. I went to the back door. This was, 2 o'clock in the afternoon by the time we got home from Portland, probably. And it was a nice day, so I just left the back door open so my dog could go in and out, because I had no idea when he had last needed to go outside. The front door, my sister-in-law closed behind her, but it was not locked. I went and laid down on the bed, and the longer I laid, the more it hurt. It just got so bad I couldn't even hardly move on the bed. And every time I would move, it hurt so bad that your body gives you a protection mechanism. When it thinks you're hurting yourself, it'll stop all your muscles. I mean, you can't finish your rollover if it hurts. And I heard the phone ring twice, and I could see it from my bed. It was on the arm of the Davenport. So it was probably about 11 o'clock when decided that when I didn't answer, I kept hoping that they'd come to check on me. But they thought I'd just unplugged the phone so I could get sleep. So they didn't come and check on me. So I rolled out of bed, took a long time, and I crawled to the Davenport. I almost threw up again when I looked up. When I lifted my head, I just get so nauseous. And it was all I could do to get the phone off the Davenport arm. Then it wouldn't work. I must have not even turned it off or something when he called and told me he was in the driveway to take me there. Because it sat there while I was gone, so it was 2 days off the charger, but it was dead. And it wouldn't call anybody. So I thought, well, if I put it on the base, maybe the base will give it enough power so it'll work. So I crawled around the corner. I've got pictures I'll show you later. I crawled back around to the back of the Davenport where the phone was. I had to pull the phone because it was up on the shelf. I had to pull it down by the wires, set the receiver on it. Then the only thing it would call was 911. It wouldn't take any more numbers. When I tried to call, it wouldn't take any more numbers than 911. So I got 911, told her what was happening. She said, okay, do you want me to send the ambulance? And I thought, well, I can't get my pain pills. The doctor gave me pain pills at the VA. They put them in a brown paper bag. I packed them in, and when I came by the furniture in the living room headed for the kitchen, I just set it down on one of the pieces of furniture. At that time, I couldn't remember if I tossed it into the recliner or on the love seat or where it was, but it was on one of those pieces of furniture. So I couldn't lift my head up to look for it. I couldn't get it. So yes, please send the EMTs. I need my pain pills. So she said fine, and told me to put it on the speakerphone. I did. I never use a speakerphone because I can't understand them. My hearing aids are broke, so I've got this borrowed. They showed up outside, and I was working on the porch, so my house numbers weren't on the porch. They were in the corner on the post office mailbox. I had my house numbers, but they were off the house because I was working on building a porch. So I saw the flashlight in the window. They shined the flashlight, and I thought they was looking for the house numbers. So I started hollering for help because I wanted them to know this is the house. I hollered for help for quite a while. Got tired of calling for help. Took a little break. Then I decided they must have not seen the house number, so they just left. I never imagined they would be sitting out there listening to somebody hollering for help. And they never come to the porch. They never knocked on the door. They didn't talk to me, let me know they were there or staying. I truly thought they had left. So I started hollering, hoping a neighbor would hear. I couldn't wait for a neighbor to come over and tell them that, yeah, they pulled up and then left. But the neighbors all said they didn't hear me. So none of the neighbors came. Finally, I laid there and it was just hurting so bad. And I did notice when I was hollering for help, the hollering seemed to take my mind off the pain. It felt better when I was hollering. So they were the ones that left me laying there. My sister, my whole family's got bad backs. My sister had a back surgery. They nicked an artery. They didn't know it. They sent her home. When she went upstairs to bed, it burst. She had called the ambulance. She had bled so much by the time they got her to the hospital. She said she was just numb. She said she was just about to black out from loss of blood by the time they got her there. Now, if that would have happened to me, I would have bled to death in there. they would have just let me die. So that, yes, I got mad. I didn't think they were out there. It really helped the pain for me to start calling them cowards and everything. I do not use the language they do. If you get a chance to read their report, I called them liars, I called them, can I cuss?
It's your opening statement.
Excuse me, but I call them chicken shits and stuff like that. I do not use the F word. Now that's another thing that makes me mad about this whole thing. I quit using the F word back when I was a kid in my 20s. I decided that just too many people just throw that around like nothing anymore. I don't like that word. They had me so upset, I said it once to the man EMT. Everything I said after they came in the house was to Kirk. Stacy, she didn't get involved in it. She was back, and I got a picture where she was. She stood back by the door and didn't get involved in it at all. The man Kirk, he came up to me after they finally came in. He came up to me and said, well, what do you want us to do? I said, well, I'd like somebody to look at my back and tell me if it's bleeding. I can't see, and it's burning so bad I can't feel it or anything. I don't know if I hurt something. I'd like somebody to look at my back. He says, no, I'm not a doctor. I can't do that. So I know that EMTs look at injuries before. My mother, before she passed, they came and helped her a lot. And they didn't come and every time take her to the hospital. They would give her nitro or whatever. They have liquid nitro and they'd give her that. And if they got her heart beating right and stuff and she didn't want to go, they would leave. I told him, okay, you can't look at my surgery. I need my pain pills. I can't lift my head. I can't reach up. I'll throw up. They're somewhere on the furniture there. Nope, that's not my job. That's his exact words. He says, no, that's not my job. My only job is to take you to the hospital. And right then it was obvious that they were going to take me to the hospital if they had to make it so I needed the hospital, which is what happened. He wouldn't get me my pills. So, okay. I hadn't swore at him or called him. I didn't know they heard me before because I thought they weren't even out there. I was just cussing because it made me feel better. And they were the object of my anger because they left me laying there on the floor. The pills, nope, that's not my job. So, yes, I started telling him, well, you won't look at it, you won't give me my pills. You're about worthless, get out. That's when he started telling me every time I tell him to get out, you invited us here. I told him, I invited you here to help. You won't help, get out of my house. They would not leave. They wouldn't tell me why they wouldn't leave. The Castle Rock cop, he stood there off to the side. He never said anything through all this about why they were staying, why they wouldn't leave. Finally, yes, I started calling them every name I could think of. I called them every kind of coward, every kind of low-life person. What kind of person won't step over 10 feet at the most and find a paper bag with my pills in it? No, that's not their job. So they wouldn't even give me my pills. So then they wouldn't leave either. So then in the course argument, I said, well, will you call somebody to come get my pills? He said, no, we don't have any phones. So, okay, there's a police officer, 2 EMTs. I told them then, well, I'm going to have to call you a liar on that. I don't believe these days there's 3 professional people here that neither one of you have a phone. So, okay, then he admitted, yeah, we got a personal phone. So I told him, anybody on the street walking by somebody in this kind of pain would use their phone to call for help. No, they wouldn't do it. I started ordering them out of the house again. I told them, I consider you trespassers. The officer stood there, he never said anything about why they weren't trespassers. I told them they were trespassing. I told you to get out of my house. You're trespassers. No, they wouldn't leave. They wouldn't explain why they wouldn't leave, except they did give me guff every time I couldn't answer the question right. I've got multiple learning disabilities. I don't remember numbers. And when the phone went blank, it took the numbers off, so I couldn't remember my brother's or anybody's phone numbers. And in the state I was in, the only phone book where I had a number was a sister in Shelton. Kirk called, rather than move 10 feet to give me my pills, he got my, at close, well, it was probably a little after midnight that time. He got my sister in Shelton up to get the phone number for my sister in Castle Rock. Now she's right there in Castle Rock, and she's got a son that's in his upper 40s, still young enough to getting up and running down into town. He lives about 2 miles out of town. And getting my pills, he'd have went right back to bed and gone to sleep. It wouldn't have bothered him much at that age to do that. So I asked him, because he wouldn't let me talk. He wouldn't bring the phone. I was laying facing the other way. He stood down and below my feet. I couldn't hear the phone, but he wouldn't let me talk. I wanted him to hold the phone down. I'm a caveman. I don't have a computer. I don't have a cell phone. I don't have any of that. And when people try to show me pictures on their cell phones, I usually tell them just to hold it, because every time they tip upside down and everything, when you're not used to them, the cell phone moves pretty fast. But I didn't want to hold his cell phone. I just wanted him to hold it down to where I could hear and talk. He would not do that. I don't know, my sister he called, we had, in younger days, nothing but hate for each other. But when we got older, I thought we was getting along better. I blamed myself for even bringing her number up, because he called her, and her words, now I've never called for help in the middle of the night or anything. If one of them, my sisters, and any of the other ones would have too, my first words would have been, where you at? I would have known in the middle of the night if she called me, she needed help. Her response was, and it was just like he knew what she was going to say, because he held the phone to where I could hear that. And her response was, I can't think of anybody that I'd call to help him. So I didn't holler at her. I told him, I said, hang up on the bitch. See, like I say, we've had our problems all along. That ain't the first time I've called her that. It probably won't be the last. But anyhow, she said, I can't think of anybody I'd call to help him. When I told my brother that the next day when I got the phone working, that's what he said. Why didn't she call me? He lives on the far side of Longview. He'd have had to drive clear to Castle Rock just to give me a pill. So I thought the 2 mile away nephew would have done much better. But no, I didn't get any help. They still wouldn't give me the pills. So yes, I cussed at him, called him everything, told him what low-life people I thought they were to come into somebody's house and do this. When I couldn't remember numbers, he'd tell me, what's wrong with you? And when my sister said that, that's what he told me several times after that. Your own family won't help you. So any of the other ones would have. That was just the only number. It was my mistake for giving it to him, or telling him where it was written down. But anyhow, they still wouldn't give me my pills. Finally, Stacy came from around back. That's why I'm sorry for the one time, well, I'll tell you in a minute, I did cuss at her. I'm sorry for that, because she had stayed out of it. The whole thing was between me and Kirk, the officer. He wasn't right either. He should have stepped in, but he didn't. He stood there and let all this go on. She came around and got my pills, and I saw her come up beside him, and she nudged him in the side and handed him my pills. That's when he finally gave me a pill. Then they still wouldn't leave. Told him, I just need to go back to sleep. I need my pink pill. You got me that. Get out of my house. They would not leave. Finally, we argued back and forth. I got so tired of it, I got up, and I'm on my hands and knees, and I can't lift my head up without throwing up. I got turned around behind the Davenport and the shelves where the phone was. I got turned around and I crawled back. I just wanted to go to bed. I remember thinking that when I got through the doorway, I was going to tell them, when you guys leave, lock the door and don't steal anything. I was going to try to go to bed. I had forgotten all about him putting my dog in there because he did not growl at him. He barked. When they pulled up, he barked once, and that's one thing I wanted on a witness. I didn't get a witness. I wanted 911. I didn't get the 911 operator as a witness. She heard all this. The dog barked once, and I called him over to me, and I had my arm around him, and we were sitting there the whole time I was hollering for help. The dog was with me. He wasn't out there growling at them like they explained. That also makes me very mad for them to blame their stuff on my dog. He is a pit bull, and he's the sweetest thing you'll ever find. I've had so many people tell me what a good representative for the breed he is. And it really makes me mad that they use him just because he's a pit bull for an excuse, not coming in. That still ain't an excuse because he was in a fence that won't let him to the porch. There's 3-car parking spots between the gate and my porch. They wouldn't have had gotten any closer to him than that to come to the porch and talk to me. They wouldn't do it. They didn't come to the porch the whole time. They got there, I've got the report. They got there at 11:27. They didn't come in until after the town cop put my dog in the bedroom. That was at 12:05. 43 minutes they left me laying in there screaming for help until I got tired of that and started swearing rather than it does. If you don't know it, I mean, it does. It makes you feel better. And so, yes, I was calling them every kind of coward and every kind of lowlife I could think of. I did not know they were out there listening to me. Probably wouldn't have made a difference. I might have even hollered more. But when they did come in, they refused to help. When I asked for my pills, he said, no, that's not my job. The next day, I called the fire marshal. Well, I called the cops to make a complaint. Oh, sorry, it wasn't the next day. The next day, I was still sick. My brother and sister-in-law had to come and bring me food. But about 3 or 4 days after that, I called the police, and then he told me for them, I had to call the fire marshal. I called the fire marshal, told him. He said he was right. He said people get confused about that. He said, we're not a service company, we're a transport company. I mean, he sounded like people are just a piece of meat. You know, we don't have to go there and help you. All we do is a transport company. People make that mistake. Well, I've seen them come and help my mom many times without transporting her. And I never got the impression that they were strictly a transport company. But that's what he told me, that he was perfectly right for telling me that wasn't his job to give me the pills, because they're not a service company, they're a transport company. So, no help there. The chief of police, he's the one I had to file a complaint with. He didn't even let me know it was an interview. He found that they followed policy correctly. And he said he interviewed me. He talked to me on the phone a couple
Objection,
times.
this is gonna be hearsay, that's not evidence in
You can't talk about what someone else told you, and I'm gonna give you about 5 more minutes to go ahead and finish your opening, all right?
Ooh, okay. How can I cram being mugged? Anyway, when I tried to reach for the door, I had to walk right, or had to walk. I did not walk. That's like they say, swinging the lamp. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't do that for nothing. I started to crawl over to the door and reach for the door handle. He admits in his statement that he says he stepped in front of me to block me. When he stepped in front of me, he didn't just block me, he leaned into me. He did not knee me like trying to knock the wind out of me or anything like that. But he knocked me down. That's assault. I wanted to file charges. They wouldn't take them. They said I had to go to the Castle Rock cop to get him to file. Well, he had already, there's no help there. So these guys can come in and do this to me is not legal. That was assault. They were trespassing. He pushed me down. When I landed on my side, I don't mean landed hard. Like I say, he didn't knee me. But in the condition I was in, all he had to do was lean on me to put me down. And I went down on my left side, right at the lamppost. We argued back and forth for a little bit. I wanted to go to bed. I had had my pain pill. I just wanted to get into bed and sleep. The lamppost was right there. I was laying on the base. That's how the police officer broke it, because he couldn't lift it up because my arm was on the base of it. And just like he demonstrated, saying it's assault, to get somebody to move or something, you go, ugh. Well, okay, I took the lamp. I wanted him to step out of the way. I worked myself up to where I thought I could get a little bit of a fast crawl and get to the door. And if I got that door open, I was going to grab the sill and drag myself in if they tried to drag me back out. So I was going to go for the door. He was standing right in front of it. So I rocked the lamp post that I was leaning on. It was one I couldn't have hit it. But I rocked it, pulled it back, and I was just getting ready to start to get up, and I had my weight on the base of it, trying to get up on my knees, when the officer that had been sitting back behind, never saying anything, grabbed it, gave a yank. Well, he couldn't pull it up because I was laying on the base, so it broke the pedestal. So then I leaned back and hollered at him. I told him, "You broke my lamp." He says, "No, you broke your lamp when you tried to hit me with it." Of course, I'm calling him a liar. I didn't try to hit you with it. I didn't try to hit him, but I at least did try to move it to him, trying to get him to step aside so I could make it go for my bedroom door. That's when I started calling him a liar, telling him I had never tried to hit him or anything. That's when he jumped on my back.
Okay, Mr. Crane, 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes.
He had his knees in my back that I just had surgery. He was trying to twist my arms that I couldn't move around behind me. He was wrestling me around and trying to put me in places that my back just was not allowed. And he was doing it as roughly, and he was assaulting me. Finally, the deputy sheriff came. They had called for assistance. Well, thank goodness, because I needed that assistance. When the deputy sheriff came, he wasn't there very long. He talked to me nice. I told him, he told the town cop that he thought he could get off of me, so he did. So the deputy sheriff, when that town cop got off of my back, I could have kissed that sheriff on the lips. As far as I'm concerned, he's a hero. The EMTs and the policemen, I know everybody's calling them heroes, and a lot of them are. That's why I did tell the cop when he was on my back, I told him, "I hope you get corona and die." I didn't holler at him. He says I hollered at all of them. I was talking to him. He was the cop with his knee in my back right where I had surgery and trying to twist me around. I'm sure he was the first in line to get his shot, but I mean, it's inhumane what they did to me. And now I don't feel safe in my own house. Where's the sanctity of your house? I mean, every time a cop drives by my house now, I gotta wonder if they're gonna come in and beat me.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crane.
Okay. Well, this is what you'll hear. Nothing like what they're claiming happened. So, I was the one assaulted. They would not take my charge, but they took the policeman.
Okay, Mr. Crane. Now what's gonna happen is the state is gonna call us first witness.
Your Honor, we will call Kirk Huhta.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Be seated, and you may speak without your mask. Go ahead, Mr. Crowe.
Sir, could you please state your full name for the record?
Kirk Matthew Huhta,
Okay. And sir, can you spell your last name?
Huhta.
Okay. And sir, what do you do for a living?
I'm a firefighter EMT for Cowlitz County Fire District 6.
Okay. And how long have you been a firefighter slash E EMT?
For Cowlitz County Fire District 6 has been 4.5 years.
Just one sec. Pull your mic a little closer. Can everyone hear at the back of the room? Good? Okay, yeah. Keep it close to you. Thank you.
So 4.5 years with Cowlitz County 6. And what about before that?
I was a volunteer firefighter EMT and still am for Cowlitz 2 Fire and Rescue for a total of all is like 12.5 years.
Okay. And what kind of training have you received to be a EMT and a firefighter?
So you have your initial training is 3 to 6 months, depending on your hospital time and field training. And then you have ongoing training for every month to keep your cert current or your certification current.
Okay. And I'd like to take your attention back to April 10th of 2020. Were you working that day?
Yes,
Okay. And where were you working?
I was working at Cowlitz County Fire District 6 in Castle Rock, Washington.
Okay. And did you get called out to an incident at the defendant, Mr. Crane's house?
Yes.
Okay. And about what time were you dispatched to that?
It was about 11:30 at night, I believe.
Okay. And how does that happen as an EMT? How do you get dispatched mechanically?
So we have an alarm system at the station, so we're there for 24 hours a day. And when someone calls 911, it goes to our dispatch center, which then they send out the alert to us, and then we go get in the rig and go.
Okay. And so when you say you get in the rig and go, what kind of rig did you go in?
An ambulance.
Okay. And did you go there by yourself?
No, I had my paramedic partner with me for the day, Stacy, Poff.
Okay. And so you and Miss Poff go to the defendant's address. And do you have that address that you went to?
I do not remember it off the top of my head.
Okay. And did you give a written statement in this case? Did you?
Yes.
Okay. And would it help to look at your written statement to refresh your recollection of the address that you were dispatched to?
Yes.
Okay. And what address was that? I believe it's at the top left.
No, that would be the address of our fire station.
Oh, okay. That's not a problem. So the defendant's address is in Castle Rock. What state is that?
Washington.
And what county?
Cowlitz.
Okay. And when you were dispatched there, what happened?
So we arrived, we were dispatched for a patient complaining of back pain. We arrived, we were told by our dispatch to access the house from the back door. So we gained access, we went through a gate into the backyard, to the back deck. When I opened the door to go into a utility room, I announced that we were the fire department, we were there. I then walked into the house after hearing nothing. As I walked in, I kept announcing myself and who I was. I made it around through the utility room into like a kitchen area when I heard a dog barking, so I stopped, and it was dark and there, so I had my flashlight. I stopped, and I was looking for the dog, because dogs, when they're not used to you and you're in their territory, can be very protective. So I made it partway into the kitchen. That's when the dog came at me, barking and growling. I then turned around and ran out of the house.
So you ran out of the house when
Yes.
Did you see the dog at that point in time?
When it was coming at me, I saw it for a short second, and then I turned and ran out of the house. And we shut the door, and then we stood out in the backyard.
Okay. And what happened when you were in the backyard? What did you guys do?
So when we were in the backyard, we immediately called for law enforcement for them to come out to help us out with either the dog, or then they have other avenues of like Humane Society or stuff like that. So we called for law enforcement to have them come out. In the meantime, when we were standing there, we could hear Mr. Train yelling swear words at us, calling us names that I don't know that I can say in here.
Yes, you can. What was he calling and saying?
He was calling us chicken shit assholes and calling us, a bunch of low-life scum, that, we were, worthless and that type of stuff. So we stood there and waited. Once Castle Rock PD got there, which was just a very short period of time, just a few minutes, we then, myself and the Castle Rock officer went inside, and Officer Gann was able to get the dog, was in front of me, was able to get the dog to go into a bedroom and shut the bedroom door. So that way the dog was contained.
Okay. And then what happened?
Once the dog was in the bedroom and was contained, then we went up to Mr. Crane, who was laying on the floor by a bookcase, in between a couch and a bookcase. And we asked him, what was going on at the time, because we get the generic of the back pain is what our dispatch was. So we asked him what was going on, to get more of a descriptive, like we would with any patient. He told us that he had had surgery that day, and then on his car ride home, they had swerved or some sort of thing where he re-injured his back and he was in pain. So we asked him, what we could do for him. He didn't want to go to the hospital. He wanted to stay home. So in our professional opinion, he couldn't care for himself. If he couldn't get up and walk around, couldn't get to his pain meds, couldn't do any of that himself, he can't care for himself. So we weren't going to let him just stay there by himself with no help. So we were trying to figure out a way to get either someone to come take care of him, and if that wasn't the case, then he would have to go to the hospital for somebody to take care of him. So then we were trying to get a hold of family. He couldn't remember family members' name or phone numbers off the top of his head. We finally located a little book with some numbers in it, which we found his sister Ida's number. We tried to use his home phone on multiple times, but the phone had been off it was a cordless phone, had been off the hook so long that every time it would last for a few minutes and then it would die. So about the time she would answer the phone and they would start to talk, then the phone would die. So then I agreed to let him use my personal phone, because we did not have a department issued phone, but I said, okay, I will keep it on speakerphone, because with his behavior that had been erratic and yelling at us, and the few times that he called his sister, he kept getting frustrated that the phone would die and was getting irritated with his sister. I was worried that if I gave him my phone, he would take it and throw it after when he would get mad and potentially break it. So I said, okay, we can use my phone. We will keep it on a speakerphone. I will hold it near you so that way everybody can hear what's going on. And then that way, if the sister had questions for us, we could also help with answering the questions.
Sure. So what happened when you called the sister?
Once we got a hold of the sister and explained to her what was going on, she said she was unavailable to come, which then Mr. Crane got very verbal and angry with his sister and was yelling at her over the phone. And then so then that phone call ended. We then got a hold of, I believe it was she got a hold of a nephew who called us back and said, hey, this person might be able to come there, but it won't be able till tomorrow morning.
So then what happened?
So at that point, we told him that, you have no family to take care of you. You need to be taken care of by somebody who can't take care of yourself. At that point, he was telling us that we needed to leave the residence because we weren't helping him, we weren't doing anything for him. When we were trying to give him solutions we could take him to the hospital. He then started crawling for the bedroom door, which the dog was in, and we told him, no, we're not gonna allow you to go into that bedroom because if the dog gets out, it was already aggressive towards us once. We don't need that to go again, we don't want that to happen again. There was also a large pile of like hand tools, like wrenches and stuff by that door that I was also concerned about with him being agitated, that he could potentially use one of those as a weapon towards us. So I stood in front of the bedroom door to not allow him to get in there.
Okay, so you moved your positioning to in front of the door, so he couldn't open the door that had the
Yes.
dog in.
As he crawled along the bookcase towards that bedroom door, I just moved with him and stayed between him and that door to not allow him to open that door, as we did not want the dog to come out.
Right, and then what happened?
At that point, he reached back and grabbed a hold of a lamp. It went back, and then as it was came into the forward motion, Officer Gann, who was standing off to the side and kind of behind him, reached out and grabbed the lamp, which with that happening, it broke the lamp as it was coming forwards towards me.
Okay, and the lamp, do you remember if he was holding it with one hand or two?
I do not.
Okay, and as he was swinging it towards you, what part of your body was the lamp coming towards?
The lamp would have been coming towards my upper body, chest, or head area.
And did you take evasive action to move to avoid the lamp hitting you?
Yes, I stepped back into the side.
Okay, and if you wouldn't have moved back into the side, do you think the lamp would have hit you?
Yes, it would have.
Okay, and how tall about was the lamp?
The lamp would have been your average, like 4 to 5 foot tall, like lamp next to a couch.
And then what happened?
Once Officer Gann stopped the lamp from hitting me, then there was a altercation struggle between the officer and Mr. Crane when he was being placed under arrest. Once he was under arrest, there was some arguments between them where Mr. Crane was very verbal towards everybody that was in the room, but especially towards Officer Gann. Then at that point, Officer Gann had called for cover, and Deputy Bauman showed up from the sheriff's office. He came in and was able to help calm down Mr. Crane and everybody and kind of diffuse the situation, which then once everything was calmed back down, we told them that, we can't let you just stay here because you can't take care of yourself. And then he then agreed to go to the hospital with us, which then we got him onto the gurney and took him to the hospital.
So you and Miss Poff put him on the gurney and took him to the hospital?
Yes. So in his state where he couldn't stand or walk, we asked him what would be the best way to get him out to the gurney, which was outside by the front porch.
Yeah.
He said the best case for him would be for him to crawl outside. That way he didn't have to feel like he'd stand. We didn't have to lift him to potentially injure him some more. So he crawled out to the gurney and then laid down on the gurney. Okay. And then we wheeled him into the ambulance and transported him.
Okay. And when the lamp was being swung at you, was he still like on his knees or?
Yes, because he had crawled from the bookcase and was going towards the door. And then when he got to where that lamp was, he had stopped there and he was on his hands and knees on.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. Thank you. Mr. Crane might have some questions.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Crane.
Yeah. You're so you're saying I was not laying, I was on my hands and knees at the lamp?
Yes.
How did I swing it if I was on my hands and knees?
You reached out with your one hand, grabbed onto it, and turned and swung.
Okay, I could not have done that. I would have fallen. I couldn't move like that. I'd have thrown up if I'd have moved like that.
Okay, so Mr. Crane, is that a question you're asking? You need to ask
Yeah,
questions.
don't you think if I couldn't be by myself, how was I able to do that? You're saying you couldn't leave me alone. You did not tell me that. You didn't tell me
Okay, Mr.
any of
Crane,
that.
Mr. Crane, I'm sorry, but you have to ask it in the form of a question, and you have to give him an opportunity to answer you.
Would you like to change your statement to the truth, or are you gonna stay with what you just said?
I wrote my statement and I will stick to my statement.
Okay, some people like it now.
Objection, that's not a question.
Sir, that's not,
I'm sorry, but when somebody's,
Objection,
Listen,
this is not a question.
you've got to be, number one, you gotta be appropriate, and number two, do you have more questions for him?
no sense in it.
Do you have any more
No,
questions
no,
for
no.
him? Okay, so you're finished with his testimony?
Uh,
Okay, thank you.
no, just a second. You say you came in the house.
Yes.
How come you didn't come to the front porch? How come you didn't come to that door? It wasn't even locked. You could have come and talked to me
Okay,
on
hold
that
on.
door. How come you didn't?
Hold on, I'm not trying to be rude, but you gotta ask it in the form of a question, not a statement.
Well, that's my question, is why didn't you come to the front porch?
Okay,
Because when our dispatch told us that from talking to you on the phone, that you wanted us to access your residence from the back door, that tells us the front door is locked and we can't access there. So we came to the point of access that you requested us come to.
She asked me if you guys. had
Objection, this
access.
isn't a question.
okay, again, sir, it's gotta be a question, Mr. Crane.
Well, I cannot think of any way to word it as a question without making the statement of what happened in the question.
Now, I understand, but you can only ask questions. You will have an opportunity to testify yourself, but for him, you have to ask him questions.
Well, I've got no questions to ask him if he's just gonna.
Okay.
Okay, so you have no further questions? All right, anything else, Mr. Crow?
No, I don't have any further questions.
Okay, may he be excused.
Yes, he may be excused. I'm not planning on calling him back.
Okay, thank you very much for coming in, appreciate it.
The state will call Stacy Poff to testify.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Paz. Hello. Go ahead, raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Thank you. Go ahead and have a seat. You can take your mask off, and then just make sure you speak into the microphone so they can hear you all the way in the back. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Crane.
Ma'am, could you please state your full name for the record and spell your last name?
Stacy Lee Poff, P-O-F-F.
And ma'am, what do you do for a living?
I'm a firefighter paramedic at Cowlitz County Fire District 6.
And how long have you been a paramedic firefighter?
I have been a paramedic for 16 years and a firefighter for the last 6 years.
Okay. And what training do you go through to be a paramedic?
I went through Central Washington University, so it's a year-long course, a paramedic course certification.
Okay. And then to be a firefighter, is there also training that goes along with that?
On-the-job training.
And were you working in that capacity back on April 10th of 2020?
Yes.
And what shift were you working that day? Are there shifts, like times that you come on duty and off?
8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Or, I'm sorry, 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. So 24-hour shift.
24-hour shift. And did you get dispatched to a call in Castle Rock?
Yes.
Okay, and who were you, did you go to that call with?
Kirk, Huhta.
Okay. And did you come in contact with the defendant, Mr. Crane, at that Castle Rock address?
Yes.
Okay. And can you explain what happened when you got up to his house?
When we were called, we walked through, I would assume it's the back porch. We walked through the fence. The back door was open. It was dark. My partner walked in first. He walked in, I believe it was through the laundry room, and to the left, that's when we heard the dog growl and bark and run towards us. So my partner turned around, came back out. Once he crossed the threshold of the door, I shut the door, and then we backed out of the fence.
Had you heard, or did you guys announce yourself when you came into the residence?
Yes,
Okay, what were you saying?
we would have said fire department.
Okay. And what, did you have any contact with Mr. Crane at that point in time?
Not physical contact, no. We could hear, but no physical contact.
You could hear his voice?
Mhm.
Okay. And when you were outside the house, what, did you hear him at all from outside?
We could hear him yelling at us, correct.
Okay, and what kind of things was he saying?
Honestly, I would not be able to quote after this long a time.
Okay, do you remember what kind of, was it friendly or unfriendly?
He was yelling.
Okay, all right. And what did you guys do then?
Once we backed out, we called for the officers because we didn't feel like the scene was safe. And then we walked outside of the fence to where it was closed off from his house. And we stood there and waited for Officer Gann to come.
Okay, and would that be pretty typical if you try to respond to someone's house and they have a dog?
Yes, we're trained if we feel unsafe, we back out and call for the officers.
Okay. And when which officer showed up?
Officer Jeff Gann.
And when Officer Gann showed up, what happened then?
He made entry into the house. He was able to corral the dog. He got the dog in a bedroom, I would assume. The door was closed when we walked in. And then he came in and told us it was safe to come in.
So then what happened?
So we walked in. He was very upset with us for not coming in initially. We offered our help and asked what he was needing because we only got dispatched to back pain. He wanted us to evaluate him. We did the best we could evaluating him. He wanted his pain medication. Typically, if people want medication and we're gonna end up taking to the hospital, we don't like to give them anything because we're not supposed to. So we asked if he was gonna go to the hospital or not. It was our understanding that he didn't want to go to the hospital. And so we kind of moved on from there to try to give him some help.
So then what happened?
He wanted to call his sister. He tried to call his sister several times on his cordless phone. That ended up dying. He wanted to use our phone. We only carry our personal phones at the time. So we offered to use our phone, but we ended up putting it on speaker because we don't let people physically touch our personal items. We were able to get a hold of his sister and keep her on speakerphone. He did ask for his medications, which we were able to get the bag and hand it to him, but we cannot administer other people's medication to him.
Okay. And so what happened when he talked to his sister?
He got super angry with his sister because his sister wasn't able to come over, and whether it be a nephew or whoever else was there, it was a gentleman that he wanted to come over. They were also unable to come over.
So then, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. He grew angry with that. And ethically, we can't leave somebody there who's not able to take care of himself.
And so then what happened?
So we tried to work through that. After the phone incident, he was laying behind a couch up against his face facing the back wall of the house. He came around, he went for the door where the dog was at, my partner Kirk. He ended up stepping in front of that door. There was also some tools and stuff laying on the floor. So he stepped in front of that stuff so he wasn't able to grab that. At that time is when he grabbed the lamp and swung it towards my partner Kirk.
So can you explain how he grabbed the lamp and swung it?
He ended up turning himself on the floor and crawling over towards the lamp to grab it.
Okay. And then how did he swing it?
He pulled it down and swung directly at my partner.
Okay. And was this like a floor lamp?
Yes.
And about how big was the floor lamp?
Probably like, I honestly don't remember. A regular floor lamp size.
Okay, so would about 5 feet be average?
That or a little less, yeah.
Okay. And when he swung it at Kirk, what part of the body was he swinging it towards?
It would have been like his upper chest area.
Okay. And did you see Kirk do anything?
He stepped back. Officer Gann grabbed the lamp and pulled it back.
Okay. And then what happened?
The patient continued to somewhat resist and yell, so Officer Gann kneeled down on him, got him onto the ground to control him, and he continued to yell and make fists towards Officer Gann.
Okay. And then what happened?
Kind of argued back and forth. He wanted us to leave. We tried to explain several times that we can't leave. If you can't take care of yourself, we legally and ethically can't just leave somebody there. There's detrimental effects to that. And that time, Officer Gann kind of just held him where he was while we waited for the deputy, his backup, to come.
I don't have any further questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Crane.
Mr. Crane, go ahead.
Okay. Now, how did I swing the lamp? I was laying down, you say?
You had crawled over to the lamp, so you were not laying flat.
You did not see, or are you actually saying that he did not push me down with his legs and I went right down? You're saying he did not push me down?
You were laying flat. He came down with his knee on you to hold you onto the ground.
No,
Because you
not
were
the
swinging.
officer,
The officer.
Kirk.
Kirk did not touch you, no. He took a step back.
When I tried to go to bed and he wouldn't let me, he pushed, did you not see him push me down?
He did not push you. He stepped in front of the door, so you couldn't open the door because that's where your dog was.
Where were you standing?
I was standing between Kirk and Officer Gann. So I would have been,
Weren't you standing, you weren't standing back by the door, the front door?
not toward, I was on that side of the door, but I was up closer into the living room. I was not right at the door.
Yeah. You guys stood outside. How long did you stand out there listening to me holler for help?
Oh, probably 5 to 7 minutes. It was response time for Officer Gann.
Okay, you don't think it was a lot longer than that?
I do not.
Okay, well, 5 or so minutes is a long time when you're in pain.
Okay, Ken, you have to ask a question, not make statements.
Don't you think 5 minutes might be a long time when somebody's in pain and not getting any help?
Unfortunately, if somebody is comfortable, but if the scene is unsafe and we feel unsafe and we end up getting hurt, there's absolutely nobody there to help you.
Well, I can't think of any.
No other questions?
No.
Okay. Mr. Crowell, anything else?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Is she excused?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Your Honor, the state calls Officer Gann.
Okay. And then did you want to take a lunch break after that?
I think so.
Okay. Hello. Raise your right hand, swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Do me a favor, talk into the mic so they can hear you all the way in the back, and then you can leave your mask off. Thank you. Mr. Crowd?
Sir, could you please state your full name for the record and spell your last name?
Jeffrey Gann, Gann.
And sir, what do you do for a living?
I'm a police officer with the city of Castle Rock.
And how long have you been a police officer with the city of Castle Rock?
Approximately 18 years.
Okay. And I'm assuming you went through like the police academy for training and
Yes.
did all that, 18 years. And as a police officer with the city of Castle Rock, what's your basic duties when you're on duty? Like what do you do?
Patrol and investigations.
Okay. And taking your attention back to April 10th of 2020, were you working that day?
Yes.
Okay. And were you dispatched to an incident involving Mr. Michael Crane?
Yes.
Okay. And about what time were you dispatched to that?
I don't recall the exact time, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 p.m., 11:30 p.m.
Okay. And where were you dispatched to?
I believe it was the 500 block of Hibbard Street,
In what town?
Castle Rock,
Okay. And what state?
Washington.
And when you got there, who did you have contact with initially?
Initially, I had contact with members of Cowlitz Fire District 6, paramedic Stacy Poff, and EMT Kirk Huhta.
And was that outside the residence?
Yes.
What part of the area was it?
Excuse me?
Where approximately did you have contact with them?
They were standing next to the ambulance.
Okay. And then what did you do?
They advised me that someone inside had called for help, but they couldn't make entry because there was a dog that was being aggressive.
And what did you do then?
I went to the door. I could hear the dog barking. I went inside to see if I could find the dog. I could hear a male subject, who later determined to be Mr. Crane, was yelling for help. He was screaming that the fire department personnel were chicken shit pussies because they wouldn't come inside the house.
Okay. And when you had interactions with the dog, were you able to get the dog calmed down, or?
So when I entered the house, the dog was barking a lot. It was very loud. But when I found Mr. Crane, he had a hold of the dog by the collar, and I helped get the dog into another room and shut the door so that the fire personnel could enter the house.
Okay. And then what happened?
At that point, I let the fire department personnel came in, and I just kind of stood back and let them do their thing.
Then the dog was put in what part of the house?
I believe it was a bedroom.
Okay. And then what happened?
The fire department personnel had some interaction with Mr. Crane. He was very upset with them because they wouldn't immediately come in the house. He was very derogatory towards both paramedic Poff and EMT Huhta, called them names, yelled and screamed at them, demanded that they help him right now. And when they told him that, there were protocols they had to follow, he said, well, then just get the F word out of my house. At that point, it was obvious that Mr. Crane was not in a position to care for himself. So paramedic Poff advised me that they couldn't just leave.
And when you say about Mr. Crane, is this him sitting across from me here today?
It appears to be him. Can he take his mask down? Yes. Yes, that's Mr. Crane.
Okay. And so then what happened?
So I recall Mr. Crane requested that he be allowed to contact a relative to see if they could come assist him rather than the fire department, because he had decided that he didn't want their help anymore. EMT Huhta retrieved his cell phone and advised Mr. Crane that he would make a call for him. Mr. Crane was very mad that Mr. Huhta would not let him have the phone. And he said, no, this is my phone. I'm not going to let you have it, but I'll make the call, put it on speaker, which he did. The relative that he spoke to, I don't recall the name, but from my recollection, it sounded like an elderly female, was adamant that she could not respond at that hour due to how late it was and her age. And Mr. Crane yelled some expletives at the relative, called her some names, and then tried to grab the phone from Mr. Huhta. Mr. Huhta pulled the phone back away and Mr. Crane demanded again that Mr. Huhta give him the phone. Mr. Huhta said no, And so Mr. Crane reached out and grabbed a floor lamp that was sitting nearby, probably about 4.5, 5 foot tall, and swung it at Mr. Huhta. The lamp nearly struck him in the face. I reached out and grabbed the lamp and pulled it away from Mr. Crane, and then grabbed Mr. Crane in a joint lock and pinned his shoulder to the ground so that he couldn't continue to try to assault me or the medical staff.
When you grabbed the lamp, had it already waved past Huhta?
Yes.
And you were able to get the lamp away from Mr. Crane?
Yeah, when I grabbed it, it was in mid-swing, and so when I grabbed it, the tube came apart. It had 2 or 3 different pieces. I think they screw together.
Okay.
And when I grabbed it, it was swinging, so it came apart in the middle.
Okay. And I don't have any further questions.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Crane.
Okay. Now, how did I swing? Can you demonstrate how I could have swung that lamp like that? Was I on my hands and knees and on one hand and swinging it? Or how?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if I had only had it by one hand, you were standing behind me, and
No, I was not.
you weren't standing at the foot of the Davenport?
Yes, that was actually in front of you, not behind you.
No, that's behind me because I was facing.
Okay,
first. I
I'm
was
sorry.
facing-
Are you asking a question?
No use, no further questions.
You sure you don't want to ask anything in the form of a question?
I want to ask lots of things, but I can't do it without.
You can ask anything, you can ask anything you want, but it's got to be in the form of a question. You can't be making statements.
Geez.
So just take a minute and think about how you want to phrase it.
Thank you. Did the my dog, give you any trouble putting him in the bedroom? Was he acting aggressive to you?
No.
Thank you.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Is that all you have?
I can, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Do you need to have Officer Gann stay?
No, he can be released.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Crow?
Your Honor, the state will rest.
Okay. So this is what's going to happen, is the state has rested its case. So then what's going to happen is we're going to take a lunch. And then after we get back from lunch, then it's your case. And then you can bring up Deputy Bauman. And then you can present your case, all right? And then you can decide if you want to testify or if you don't want to testify. It's totally up to you. So at
Excuse
this,
the juror.
what?
Should we excuse the jury for that?
Yes. Let's go ahead and excuse the jury.